You're going to have to bear with me with this one because this is a long story. Okay, so basically, a couple of years ago, I broke my arm, and when I broke it, I had a cast on it, and I broke it I broke it at the beginning of March. My birthday was February the 28th, and that's when I broke my arm. So, because I had a cast on, whenever it would rain, I couldn't leave the house. So I had this idea. I thought I will get a cattle glove, a calving glove. So what that is essentially, when you see a vet and they have their arm up a cow's backside, that's exactly what I thought I would get, is one of those gloves which would cover the entirety of my arm so that I could then go out in the rain and so on and so forth and wouldn't have to mess about with a bin bag and whatnot. So I had this idea, and the idea was that I thought, where am I going to get one from? So I called around vets, and vets in Stoke and in Plymouth and around where I live, the area where I live, they only tend to deal with things like household pets, so dogs, cats, gerbils, that kind of thing. There was only one place where I actually found a vet who dealt with agricultural animals, and that was a vet called Albert Cottage in the Burton area of Saltash. So I went out there and I got a carving glove, and it was perfect because it kept my cast dry. Whenever I had whenever I wanted to go out. Around the same time, I had a wisdom tooth that erupted, upper left 8, if you're dentally inclined. Upper left 8 had erupted, and I had so that tooth was coming through, and it got infected. So I needed to go and get some antibiotics, and the only place that I would be able to get antibiotics, because there is a crippling lack of dentists in this country, was at accident and emergency. So I knew that they would have the antibiotics. I needed to see a doctor, and that was essentially what I did. I saw a doctor, and he prescribed me some antibiotics. But while I was in the waiting room, I ended up chatting to this girl, and we ended up getting talking about this, that, and the other. And then I went to go for a cigarette, and I put a carving glove on. And she said, "Oh, what's that for?" And I said, "It's because I'm gonna go for a cigarette. I've realised that it keeps me dry. I know it seems like an idiotic thing." And she was like, "Well, do you know, it doesn't seem that unusual." She said, "Apparently some total weirdo walked into our veterinary surgery this week with the same problem and asked for a carving glove. So I don't think you're the only one that's had this idea." And so I said, "Oh, what veterinary surgery is that?" She said, "Albert Cottage in Saltash." So I was like, "Yeah, that would be me. I would be that weirdo." So anyway, we got chatting and stuff like that. So the next day, I went for breakfast at the casino, and she dropped me a message, and we got chatting as you do, and we decided to stay in contact and just get chatting. And so obviously at points I wanted to meet her, and so we'd been chatting for a while, and she worked at she changed vets to one that was around the corner from me. So occasionally we would go for we would meet up when she was on her lunch or when she was on a break, and just spend a couple of hours chatting, sitting in the sun, that kind of thing. But nothing sinister or untoward, so to speak. Um, and then one day, uh, uh, long after the cast had come off, I might add, she sent me a message, and she asked me whereabouts it was that I lived. And so I told her, and she said, "Well, I've got to go down there very shortly." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And she said, "Well, apparently they'd received a call that there was an injured bird. See, if you find an injured animal of any description, and if you call up the RSPCA will get in touch with the local vet that will ask the local vet to go around and see to the animal so that the animal gets treated by a vet. And in this case, it was an injured bird. I believe it was a raven or a crow. Um, and So there was the two kids that had originally found it. There was her, veterinary nurse with the full nurse's outfit, by the way, veterinary nurse, and there was me. And honest to God, this bird gave us the total runaround. It was like a Benny Hill sketch. That's how bad it was. This bird, say it was injured, basically it was all over the shop. It was all over the shop, and and it had gotten underneath a car, and when it got underneath the car, right, it was right in the middle of it, so it wasn't as if it was at a distance where you could just grab it. You would literally have to like prod it with something to get it out from under the car. Um, and so she asked me what, like, if I had anything that would do that particular trick, and there was a girl that lived with me, um, and the girl that lived with me, she had a bit of an episode. Um, she decided that she was going to uh, bang in the door of one of my housemates, and I talked her down from her doing that. But obviously, that is at that point, there's no way that you can say, let's all try some conciliation and mediation in the situation to see if we can find an outcome that's useful for everyone. No. So so she'd been asked to move out, found somewhere else for her to move. So she decided to move out, and when she moved out, she had she'd left all of her stuff in the hallway of my house. So I went in, and the first thing that I reached for was a cheerleading baton, and it was like properly like very, very effeminate. But obviously, I'd be able to get under the car and just move it aside like that, and then get the bird out from under the car. And and um, and even after that was like struggling, I said to the girl, I said, like, what happens if you get it back and it's injured? And she said, well, if it's injured, then what will happen is that we'll put it out of its misery. And so I said to everybody else, I said, right, okay, so who's up for this? Basically, Nurse Death here has just said that she's going to take care of the bird if it is injured, and if it's not injured, we're worrying over nothing. So I say maybe we should just leave it and let nature take its course. And that was a very unpopular decision. Nobody liked that. So basically what happened was that we ended up like pushing the bird out from under the car, and yet still chasing it. And so we got this sheet, right, to throw it over this bird. And it was still, I can't begin to explain like how much of a kerfuffle this was. And then we came across this Polish guy, didn't speak a word of English, but you looked at him and you knew he knew how to catch a bird. Like, it wasn't the first time he'd been faced with that situation. You could just tell that was the case. And like, so basically we ended up, he got the thing, put it over the bird and caught the bird like that, right? Now, I decided, I said, I'll walk back to the surgery with you. So she had the bird like this in the blanket, and see, I work in football stewarding. I work in football, and I steward events, so very safety, security, that kind of thing. And so with people in the industry, you kind of have a reputation that you have to keep, so that obviously people know that you're confident in any kind of situation that you may be faced with, because obviously people's safety is paramount in that situation. So my next door neighbour, who is a former RAF regiment gunner and a door supervisor within the private security industry, um, he just happened to walk out of his house at that point, and he saw me with a cheerleading baton in one hand, looking extremely camp, right? and effectively somebody in a nurse's outfit carrying a bird in a blanket as we were walking up the street. And and he looked at me as if he knew I had a story for him, and I just looked at kind of like the situation, and I said, "You know what, mate? I'll tell you later."